out. Okay, so you should all get a notification of that. So guys, welcome to the A to Z of the 1 to 4. This class is, I'd say, once you finish my class here, you should feel very confident when you're talking to someone about a contract moving forward. So I know that many years ago, when I took the first contracts class, I felt really kind of insecure about filling one out and, more importantly, explaining it to my client. So because of that, I took a contracts class when I was in Dallas. That's right, why I really am Alice from Dallas. But anyway, that's my website, alicefromdallas.com. But when I took that class, when I left, I felt so much more secure and more knowledgeable. And I felt a lot better about it. So hopefully this class will make you feel the same way, because after you've taken this class, you will know more than most people out there that are writing contracts. You will know more. You'll have more access to the notes, because I take the notes for you. I've got a 51-page handout here for you on what the blank goes in those contract blanks. So this should help you. And the 1 to 4 is the main contract that people use, I'd say 95% of the time. So just know that. If anybody here doesn't have the handouts, you can email me at alicecaron@kw.com and I will send them out to you. I don't put them on the website because I really want you to come in here and absorb this instead of just putting it aside someplace and referring to it, as you need it, which I want you to do that. I want you to get you a binder, and I want you to put this and other things that I send out that are valuable to know. You can put it in a binder, and then you can always go to it and read it when you need to as well. Okay, so I'm going to try to share the screen here. I am not good at this. I don't like to share the screen. That's why I'm excited about doing it in person. But let's see how we do this. Okay, share screen. This is the one I want to share. Share. Okay, can you see the A to Z of the 1 to 4 now? Yes. You can? Okay, good.
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. Let's see how do I make that go away. Whoa. All your little pictures just kind of disappeared on me here. It minimized everything. Okay, so anyway. The A to Z of the 1 to 4 is, like I said, the primary document that you're going to use. So every time I change it, so if you come to this class more than once, you can look and see what version it is on this page here. When I make a change to it or revise something, I change the number. So we're at 8.1, just to give you an idea that things do change. When I started out at 1.0. So as well as this important things to remember. Remember to make sure you use the current documents. I've seen lately a lot of people using documents that are not the current version, especially on that general information and notice to a buyer or a seller. There's one that's this year that they put out, and it covers things that weren't covered in the 2018 version. So be sure and look at that and see what I'm talking about. I also, one of the attachments I gave you, oh, come on, it won't let me minimize it. Okay, fine. One of the things I gave you is a list of all the documents, the Texas Realtor documents, according to the category, and it has their number and it has the latest date of the latest document. So that's another way you can look to make sure if you're getting an offer on an old contract or an old another document, you can always just reach back to the agent and say, could you please send that to me on the most current, current document? That one is not in effect anymore. Well, you're supposed to use the latest one. Okay. So whenever you're really bored and there's a commercial on TV or something, read through these little documents, these little points I've made here. The current version of the 1 to 4 is dated 11/8/21. And that became effective in September. They give them out to you a little bit early so that you have time to switch everything over, but then they become effective where you have to use them after that date that's on the document. So you can read this when you want to. If there's something important, I have put a little box around it and a point to remember to tell your sellers, it's not what you just close that hurts you is what you don't disclose, because it's just human nature. People are trying to find you slipped up on something. You didn't tell them something, or they're thinking, oh, they're trying to get away with something. It's not a good thing, but that's just the way it is. Another point to remember is for buyers and sellers, it takes one to buy, but it takes two to sell. That means even though somebody may have owned a piece of property prior to a marriage or something, a partnership, whatever, then both parties need to sign it, because there is a community property involved, could be. So you want to get everybody on board agreeing up front, rather than having to fight after you've got a contract written and you only had one on the listing agreement, and all of a sudden now you've got a problem that you have other people involved in as well. So try to get everybody to sign that needs to, that has ownership in it, even if their name wasn't on the purchase of it. Their name would be associated with a marriage or a partnership. Okay, that's important. You don't want to be fighting that battle. Okay, what have I done here? I can't figure out what I've done. Let me try this. Okay, close window. I'm going to close this. Close current tab. Close that tab. Bear with me just a minute, guys. My thing is doing something weird here on me. Okay, let's try this again. Let's move on down to the A to Z. Okay, and all the latest documents should be in DocuSign and zip forms and all of that. So just keep in mind that. And I sent an email out this week about a new document that's not mentioned on here, but it has to do with flooding, and landlords. They're required to give this document to anybody that's their landlords that are going to lease a property from them. And it's not just if it's in a floodplain. It says they need to give that to them, even if it's not in one. So look for that email if you didn't get it. And if you didn't get it, well, then email me, alicecaron@kw.com, and I will get it to you. These were the latest revisions of the documents listed there, so that you can just keep track of what's going on. The first paragraph of the 1 to 4. Do you want me to go through? Typically, I just go through my notes here. I've got paragraph by paragraph what it means, rather than going on the contract. I sent you a copy of the contract as well, if you prefer to look at that. But paragraph number 1 is all about the people that are involved in the contract. The parties of the contract are blank seller and blank buyers. Seller agrees to sell and convey to buyer, and buyer agrees to buy from seller the property defined below. So this is all about the people involved. And I've just got a few little notes about that, and where you can check to see what people should be on this contract, or this offer rather. So sometimes you'll see people's name aren't on the realist tax record. Then that's an opportunity to talk to the agent and say, how come so-and-so's name isn't on here? And I understand in the listing it shows should be a different owner or something. It just means something was bought and wasn't registered timely, or something with the tax people. So just get that straight of their names, and not so-and-so and wife, or so-and-so and husband. That is not sufficient. You must have the names of everybody. And if there's not enough room to put the names on here, like this little short line for seller, you can always put that in see special provisions, and in special provisions, you can put all the names in there that go in paragraph 1. You can do that. Okay. If you have any questions, just stop me. I'm looking at the page and trying to let people in. So just speak up, because I may not see you with your hand up or something. The next paragraph is all about the property. So the first one's about the people. The second one's about the property itself. And this needs to have the formal lot and block number, addition, and the physical address on there and involved. So they're really nailing it down that this is the piece of property that's being sold. Because would you believe it? And of course you would. In the past, there have been people that thought they bought one piece of property, and they actually bought something right next to it. That is bad news for everybody. That's called attorneys get to make their Mercedes payments in advance. So just know that this is all about the property and the improvements and accessories. I highlighted a little bit of information there. It's something that's a little bit new. They're talking about security systems that are not fixtures, such as what's one of those that's the security fixture that's not necessarily. I can tell you what ours is. Ours is Ring. We have Ring on our front door, and if we were going to sell our house, which we are not, we would say, it has a Ring system to it, and that's a type of security. You can see who comes to the door, and you can talk to them through the door, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of people say, no, I want to take that with me. I say, really? You want to not get $50,000 over the list price or whatever it was over a $300 item such as a Ring or something? Really, that doesn't make too much sense. But if that's your request, then I will certainly relay that to them. You've got it sold. Now you're going to have to buy it back because you've just taken back their offer and changed it. Exclusions, this is where the sellers, if there was something in there that they didn't mark that doesn't remain that they wanted to take with them, this is where the sellers would put the exclusions. That's very, very important because it could be a mirror in the hallway or something like that that has sentimental value, which I always tell people, if you're taking a listing and they want to keep something, make sure that they take that down and wrap it up and get it ready to move it. Make it really carefully and then put something in its place, because what do people, human nature, what do people focus on when you tell them they can't have something? Yes, it's that item. It's like, it might be a little thing, but they will bring that back into negotiations somewhere down the road if you tell them they can't have it. Just to know that, no, you're not getting my Aunt Gertrude's mirror I inherited from her or whatever. Well, then put Aunt Gertrude's mirror away safely and replace it. Then you have less problems.
So
that's where exclusions would go.
Sorry, just to clarify really quickly.
Let me turn you up. Maybe it's on my end. We increase the volume here. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. So if you were to list a property and you're showing it with all of the furniture in it, you don't have to have a huge long list of what's not going to convey, right? It would just be.
No, furniture is not attached.
Oh, but a mirror on the wall would be. Okay.
It could be permanently attached, or it could be just hanging on a wall. Some items are permanently attached, like drapery rods.
Okay.
But the drapes wouldn't necessarily stay. They may want to take those drapes with them. And there are more items of misconceptions about what stays regarding drapes than anything else. It's very strange. So I was like, unless those are just magic drapes or something, I understand you paid $5,000 for the drapes. I get it. Is it worth you losing this buyer? Of course, that was in a different market when buyers were, not as quick to jump as they are now. Sure. Buyers now, just pretty much anything that's out there, they want it because there's such a shortage of properties. Okay. So our job is to go out and list some more properties so we can have some to sell. You have to list to last in this business.
Thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome. Anytime, just speak up when you have a question. Reservations, that has to do with minerals, water, timber. There was somebody that had a Christmas tree farm that they had to say, we're reserving this off of that property or something. But that's where all that would go. I mean, if they're selling a Christmas tree farm, they're selling the whole darn thing. They're not going to keep the trees and sell the land. So, but that's what they're talking about. Anything like water and minerals and gas, mainly. And then I've got notes down below what those mean, those different paragraphs. So you can, and it shows the non-realty item addendum, the TXR, that's Texas Realtors number 1924, where you would put something. If there's something, I want to tell you something else. If you see something in the MLS where it says there's washer, dryer, and refrigerator on the property, then that means that's supposed to stay with that property. Okay. What we don't realize is, when the agent that put it on there, they said, oh yeah, it has all this. Well, then that means it's going to stay. That's the impression that they're giving, but they may not mean that it's going to stay. They're just saying, yeah, it's there, not understanding. But if you represented a buyer, you'd want to do that non-realty item addendum, the TXR 1924, to say, I want the refrigerator, washer, and dryer currently in the home, and include that. Because, and quite honestly, if there's anything in those special items like that, washer, dryer, refrigerator, I always took a picture of it. When my, everybody pretty much has a phone on their camera now. I mean, a camera on their phone now. And so what I would do is I would just take a picture of it, because I have seen people substitute a different refrigerator for the stainless steel refrigerator that's in there now. People are really funny, I see people really funny in my end of this. I didn't really identify myself, but I've been doing real estate 37 years, and 15 of the years have been here as a compliance director. Compliance, everybody thinks, oh, I'd love to have your job, a compliance. I said, well, you obviously don't understand what I do then, if you would want to have my job, because I went home and cried every night for the first 2 years, because I was having to tell people difficult things. You've got to come up with $3,000 to replace this hot tub that they cut the line and took it with them, and all this kind of good stuff. It was very stressful. But then finally I realized, okay, Alice, if you're upset, and you need to think of this with your clients, if you get all upset about something, that's going to transfer to, in my case, to the agent. It's going to transfer from you to your client. Our job is to keep them calm and collected, and to make this as stress-free as you possibly can in the biggest investment they've ever made in a property. So our job is to, okay, we can, under our breath, when we're not around them, say, can you believe that person, that agent did this? But when you're talking to them, say, well, this is what they're asking. And you try to keep them calm and collected, so that they're not having perceptions that somebody's out to get them. So that's my biggest advice right there. So this is where it describes those items, where you would put them, and so you can refer to this, and there's place for notes if you want to write notes as you learn things, as you move along here. I'm excited for you, because you're going to be learning so much that's coming along here. There's so much to learn. I mean, I've been doing it a long time, but I still learn things every day. And you know why? Because things change. And rules change, and different forms are added. And so there's always something new to learn. So just be like a little sponge and absorb everything. And some things you can't change, so you just have to go with it. Okay, it's not letting me switch down. So let me do it this way. Okay, sales price, we haven't gone over that. Sales price is just simple, A, B, and C. So A and B ought to equal C. Just make sure that happens. 3A is the amount of the down payment they're putting down. 3B is the amount of financing that they're going to get. And be sure, if there's a little box, check the box. So you'd be checking this little, if there's financing involved, third-party financing addendum, check that box. So without checking that box, that third-party financing addendum might not be considered attached to this document. It just makes things cloudy, and there's a little bit more room for tension. So put the cash portion, the amount financed, and then the offer price goes in the third in C. So make sure A and B equal C, and you're good shape. Any loan funding fees or mortgage insurance premiums, they're not included in this. That's separate from this, but this is strictly down payment, financed amount, and the total price. So I do not know why this is not working. Okay, number 4 goes over leases. They now have a complete document all about leases, thank goodness, because there was so much that people would have to be remembered to put in when there's a lease involved on a property that they're buying, that they finally came up with a really good form, a document that lets them addendum regarding residential leases. That's TXR 1953. You'll notice under the notes on residential leases. And that one lets you ask for like deposits. What happens if you buy something and you didn't ask for the deposit that the people put up? Well, guess what? You just gave some money back from what you offered, because you're going to have to give them their deposit back or not, as the case is, of course, depends. So they just made it really clear that if there's a transaction involving a lease, you definitely need to have that document regarding addendum regarding residential leases. It's very important. Fixture leases. This has to do with things like water softeners. It could be, oh gosh, skylights. That's kind of different. Not skylights. What am I talking about? The solar panels. Sometimes those are on payment plans or something. You just need to have all that nailed down. So if there is an item like that, addendum regarding fixture leases, read about that, and that's important for you to note as well, because that's another thing. It's the things that you forget, that you take for granted, are going to stay when maybe they're not planning on keeping them, or maybe they are planning on keeping them and they didn't let anybody know, and they've already got it on the truck and moved away. Then we've got problems that only money can solve. Natural resource leases, that's what we were talking about earlier, about gas, mineral, water, wind, and other natural resource leases. And they came up with a document for that. I mean, gosh, this contract has started out as, a very short little contract, and through the years, it's just expanded to the size that it is now, because there's so much, and people are so litigious out there. They're wanting to sue people for anything, and they've got the ability to do that. So they've tried to make this as proof against all that sort of thing as much as they can with all these other documents. But when you hear there's a form for that, yes, there's a form for this, there's a form for that, but that's a good thing, because that helps you nail down exactly what is expected, and that's very important. Because when you have the gray areas, that's when you get in trouble with and have problems. So just know that.
Alice?
Yes.
Before you continue, can you go back? So it says if we get a natural resources on that blank, how many days is good to terminate a contract if we don't get a copy of that?
I would put as many days as you can. Here, read that bullet point right here. The seller would be in default if they failed to deliver copies of the leases after the 3rd day after the effective date.
Ooh.
The question is, how many days goes in that blank in paragraph 4C2? The answer is as long as it would take to get an attorney to review it. So I would put 10 days. I would give plenty of time to see if they can look at that paperwork to make sure that natural resource leases, how it would apply and how that would be affecting you as a purchaser. Okay. Sure. That question has come up before, so that was a good one. Okay. Earnest money and termination option. This is something new for everybody, because now termination option and earnest money all go to title, whereas used to only earnest money used to go to title. Now, in the listing agent used to have to sign for the receipt for the option fee. Well, this is taking it off of the back of the listing agent, which is really good, because now it's on title's back to handle it, and that's good. But within 3 days after the effective date is the deadline for everybody. Buyer must deliver to blank as escrow agent. That would be Stewart Title or TNT Title, whoever, at blank address. And of course, they don't give you very much room to write that in, but that's okay. Just make it small. Just put their name, or if you don't have the address, it doesn't matter. And blank dollars as earnest money and blank dollars as option fee. So they used to have it separated. Now they put it all together in this section here. And the earnest money and option fee shall be made payable to escrow agent. So you're going to make it, they're going to make it payable, both of those checks, to whatever title company name is not the title rep, but the name of the title company. And if you're not sure about that, then call your title rep person at the title company and ask them their name that should go on there. But you should, just know if it's TNT title, or if it's Stewart, or whoever it is with, just put that in there. So you're going to have a blank to put the earnest money and a blank to put the option fee. The interesting thing is now, though, they can combine that into one check instead of having to have two checks. They can have one check. And I recommend, if they don't deliver it through electronically, that they use certified funds, meaning a certified check from a bank or something, because otherwise they're going to wait like 10 days to make sure it goes through the system and it's good money. So you don't want that to affect anything. So either use their system that they have. I forgot what the name of the one that they're using now, but title companies are taking it electronically as well as in certified checks, which is it doesn't take longer, but it's just a little bit more old school. Earnest money isn't required for a valid contract unless it says in here that there's earnest money involved. If it says earnest money that's involved, then absolutely it's required. It's just used to show the earnestness of the potential buyer to the seller. If I was a seller and they weren't putting any earnest money up, I'd be wanting to know why. And that would affect my decision whether to accept their offer or not. I would say, to put up, you've got to have the deal, you've got to show me the money, and you've got to put some money down. And as some of you may know, earlier this year, there were like crazy amounts going in here for earnest money and option fee, just to try to get the deal over the 50 other people who are making an offer on the property. It was crazy. So the earnest money must be sent to title company and made payable to the title company. And keep in mind that title companies usually close at 5 o'clock. So if you're expecting to take it over after 5 o'clock on a work day and expect them to be there, they may not. You may have missed your option, your time to deliver those checks. And that's kind of scary, because that could affect your being able to stay in the deal.
Quick question about the earnest money.
Yes.
So if it's showing the earnestness of
Who's speaking? Emily? Okay, good. I can't see your face, so I don't know who.
Sorry, let me turn my camera on. Would more earnest money mean a stronger offer? Could that be perceived that way? Like if your buyers are up for it?
It definitely showed that they were more liquid and they had more cash that they could put down. That does affect people. I mean, it shows that they're not scraping by to get the deal.
Okay.
What I was seeing earlier this year, though, was more option fee. Earnest money you get back if you opt out, legally for a legal reason, you get the earnest money back. Option fee you never get back. So they were being asked to put like 5,000, 10,000 option fee in some deals, which that puts, you're never going to get that money back. So you are tied to that property, basically. You don't want to let your client get in that position. Tell them that we want to be strong, but put it as earnest money so that you can get out of it in the option period or within the financing period or whatever. There's some other ways. This document, this contract is all geared toward protecting the buyers. It's not here to protect the sellers. Everything is geared toward, if this doesn't happen, you can get your earnest money back. You'll see that time and time again in this contract.
Okay.
Just the way they are. Lays out how much earnest money and how much option money. It can be in one check, as I said. And like I said, also, they could put a 10-day hold on it to make sure that everything is good funds. They will not take cash. They don't know where the cash came from. They don't want to have suitcases full of money. No. If the last day, this is really important though, because up here in this document, it says buyer shall deliver additional earnest money. That's only if additional earnest money was required. I seldom ever see additional earnest money. The only time you'll basically see that is if you were in a backup position and you're only wanting to put a smaller amount of earnest money up while you stay in the backup position. And then you mention in there that you will add additional earnest money if you move to primary. That's about the only time. If the last day to deliver the earnest money, option fee, or the additional earnest money falls on a Saturday, Sunday, or legal holiday. I sent out an email about this yesterday too. The time to deliver the earnest money, option fee, and the additional earnest money is extended until the end of the next day. That's not one of those days, Saturday, Sunday, or legal holiday. So if you were to write one and the last day ended on, Christmas Day or something, then you would have, if Christmas Day was on a Friday, then you would skip a Saturday and Sunday and until the next day that's not a holiday. So you have to deliver it within 3 days, but you, depending on how many days are in your option period, you have that many days to get it all arranged. So buyers shall deliver, let me go down here. Okay, so when they get a check, that's one check for option and earnest, it's saying here in this paragraph 3 that it shall first be applied to the option fee and then the rest of the earnest money. So the reason they're saying that is they want to make sure that the person has an option period. What happens if they make a mistake and they don't have enough money for the earnest money that they've agreed to because they've taken the option fee out? They don't have enough. Then what could happen is you would need to get your client to rush to get that additional money to the title company ASAP, wire it or whatever, before that seller finds out that they didn't put enough in there. Because who knows, that seller may have gotten a better offer, and after this, they accepted this. This would be a way for them to say, oh, you didn't deliver the agreed amount of earnest money, so we are terminating this contract. If they find out before you get the additional money that's missing in there. So that's a thing just to be aware of. And I want you to just know right now, I'm not here to scare you about, because a lot of this stuff is scary, but I'm here to teach you so that you can be aware of things that could happen. Not trying to scare you not to get in it. It's the best business you can be in, that you're your own boss and nobody has to tell you what time you have to be there, what time you have to leave. You don't have to ask permission to take off. This is the best business you can be in, but you got to do it the right way. Okay, so I've got all the notes about if it was the first or second or the last day or whatever. Somebody's rolling something outside my office, it's allowed. So anyway, so this is what I'm talking about. If the check bounced or if they didn't get it within the time allowed, then buyer is in default, and unless the buyers can get the earnest money to the title before seller terminates, then they're in trouble. Okay. Then it goes on to talk about termination option. They can terminate if they get the termination notice to seller within blank days after the effective date. Effective date is the be all end all on contracts. So in other words, if you chose 7 days for your option period, then on the 7th day after the effective date, your buyer must opt out or negotiate repairs before 5 p.m. 5 p.m. is the magic date time on that date. And if you had 7 days and it was executed today, then tomorrow is day 1. You don't, today, the day of execution, effective date is day 0. 1 would be starting tomorrow and then 7 days out before 5 p.m. And just getting the amendment requiring, requesting repairs or something to them before 5 o'clock is not sufficient. You got nothing until you get something back from them agreeing to those repairs or that money they're going to set aside for doing repairs or improvements. You've got to have something back before that 5 o'clock deadline, because if you don't get it back from them, then guess what? Your client just bought it as it is and has no more recourse to negotiate. So they must have a fully signed amendment of contract. Now, just keep in mind, there are two types of amendments out there. There's one amendment of listing agreement, and then there's an amendment of contract. Make sure you're using the amendment of contract 1903. And that's where you would put the repairs. And if you have too many repairs, we're not talking about for missing switch plates. We're talking about big ticket items that could cost them lots of money. In that case, you're going to put it on the amendment. You're going to have your clients sign it, and then you're going to email it over to the listing agent and title, both, because you want title to know what's going on, even though it's not signed by the sellers yet. Then once they sign something, then their agent is supposed to get it back to you, hopefully before 5:00 p.m. Because if they don't, then what you would need to do, if those are deal breaker items, you would need to send them a termination prior to 5:00. So we just know that we need to know that. We just need to 5:00 is the deadline to get everything agreed to, not just sent over.
Alice, can I add to that really quick?
Absolutely.
So I've had it happen before too, and this is just kind of a precautionary thing for others. I've had agents say, oh, don't worry about the 5:00 deadline. I build really good rapport with listing agents, but I only take everything that they say with a grain of salt. So I would encourage people that even if they say that, if it is not in writing, don't believe it.
It's just a conversation.
Exactly, because it could end up costing your clients a lot.
Thank you for adding that. That is very, very important. You're so right. And that's what I tell agents when they say, well, they said that would be okay. I said, okay. And that's great that you built that rapport. However, clients could change their mind, and you have a great rapport with that agent, but that agent doesn't have the power. The client is the one. So you've got to have the client signing something, or you don't have anything to fight for. You've got nothing but a conversation. So another thing to know about option fee. In the past, the client would get the option fee immediately from their agent, and he would say, he or she would say, now go and deposit it right away. Just make sure it's good funds. That doesn't happen anymore. Since it goes to title is going to use that and record that amount for the option fee, and the buyer, if they continue with it, will get credit for that on their paperwork when it closes. However, you have to request it. Your client has to request it if they want it now rather than at closing. So that's a little different. You just need to request it in an email that we would like to have the option fee mailed to blah, 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 to me at blah, 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 whatever their address is. And I want you to also realize that the option fee time, that's the only deadline where it's 5:00 p.m. Only option. That's the only time it's 5:00. Every other deadline involved in a transaction has to do with ending at 11:59 p.m., almost midnight. You don't want to wait till almost midnight, but you have more time than 5:00 if you need to get something there. It's not 5:00 for everything. It's just for the option when you're negotiating repairs and stuff. So I put that down there to remind you if they want it. And this is the most important thing to remember. Option money is never returned to the buyer. The only time I've ever seen that is if the sellers actually did something illegal or non-ethical, and they know they're in trouble. Would they ever give the option fee back? And you would want to make sure that they signed something that if they were giving everything back, more than likely there's something legal that they're going to need to sign to make sure that they don't come back on you for something else, your client for something else down the line. That happened yesterday.
I was going to say, I had that happen on a property. It was a land listing, so it was a little bit different,
Yeah.
but they didn't subdivide the property correctly. And we had been under contract with them for a very long time and gave them extensions to do it. And
Yeah.
we put it into the termination form that option and earnest would be returned. And in the term or in the return of earnest money did the collective amount, not just the earnest amount.
Yeah. Yeah. When they goof up like that, then all they can do is try to beg for them to just take it all back. Just don't sue me. So let's move on down here. In the third day delivered option fee, we already talked about that. It falls on a Saturday. There's just more notes for you for there. So don't worry about that. Read that when you're really, really bored and have nothing else to do. Failure to timely deliver earnest money. And it just says, if they fail to deliver the earnest money within the time required, seller may terminate this contract or exercise seller's remedies under paragraph 15 or both by providing notice to buyer before buyer delivers the earnest money. So if they get caught with not getting it there in that third day, the seller can terminate and go on with a different offer if they have a better offer. We don't want that to happen. We want everybody that's trying to make this work. We're not looking for outs for our client. We're trying to protect our client so that they receive and get what they're trying to get, selling their property so they can move on to another property. So that's, yes.
So something about this situation, we were kind of talking about it yesterday with the coaches. If the seller doesn't act on it before the buyer turns in the earnest money, so let's say on the fourth day, the buyer ends up getting the earnest money there before the seller terminates.
Yep.
Does the buyer still have an option?
Well, option should have already been paid, but if they don't have option or earnest money, is it both or is it one?
I think I got the terms confused. Because
Okay.
earnest has nothing to do with option, right? That's the option money is separate.
Correct.
Disregard.
So, but to answer your question, is if that seller was to terminate and send something to the other side signed by their client saying they're terminating because something wasn't delivered timely, then that buyer gets, okay, they terminated and they defaulted. The problem is, Emily, is that if there's no earnest money there, what are you going to go after? All you can do is put it back on the market as soon as possible or sell it to somebody else that's waiting in line that wants that property. So you don't get the earnest money because they never put it up. Hopefully they put up option, but if they didn't put up option, then they don't have an option. If after the third day they haven't deposited the option, they've got no option. That's hard. That's a hard line. Okay. Earnest money, if they haven't put it up, but they get it there before the seller can terminate, then they're okay. They're done.
Got it.
Okay.
Excuse me, teacher. Excuse me.
I'm sorry.
Can I ask you, please?
Sure.
You said the option fee doesn't return to the buyer anyway.
Correct.
Then if they accept the offer, and then the buyer doesn't want to continue, he will lose the option fee.
Unless he has a legitimate reason for terminating. If he has a legitimate reason for terminating, buyers have about 30 plus ways to get out of a contract. Sellers have a couple.
Where we can find it, this 30 way?
There's a class you can take on that. There's a lady around who's written a book about it and also teaches a class. I forgot who it is right now, but I have her older version on my computer here that I refer to sometimes because it is important to know what those items are. I know there's a handout I have that has about 11 ways right off the bat that they can terminate, but I would recommend that 33 ways to get out of a contract class. I wish that she would come and teach it here sometime, but she's very busy, as you can imagine. It's a really popular class, knowing those 33 reasons.
Do you mean?
I'm sorry?
Do you mean the buyer can don't continue and doesn't lose the option fee?
They will lose option fee regardless. They're going to
Okay.
lose option, but they might be able to get earnest money back.
But the option fees, no.
Option fee, no. If they gave the option fee back, they would
Yeah.
have no option to get out of it for the reason they're trying to get out of it. If they get out of it within that option period, say they have 7 days, if they get out of it anywhere before that 7th day, they should get earnest money back, but never get option money back ever.
Okay, thank
The
you. So
way that I explain it to my clients is you are buying this period of days
Yeah.
and you need to be able to compensate the sellers for having the property off the market for that period of time. And
Right.
that usually makes it completely
Yeah.
understandable to clients as to why you would lose this money.
That's a very good way to put it. Yes,
thank you.
you're welcome. And thank you, Lisa. Okay, so the next thing we have title policy and survey. This pretty much is you know, title's going to take care of this, but so you understand a little bit of it, I put some notes on here. The paragraph names the title company who will provide title insurance for the buyer. And normally, well, I don't know if anything's normal anymore, but typically seller paid for the title policy, buyer paid for the survey in most contracts. In this market, we were having buyers offering to pay for anything and everything just to get the deal. So that's typically what's happening. The exceptions to what the title insurance will cover are numbered 1 through 8. So what they won't cover are these 8 items here that are listed, just so you know. The one exception that can be amended is number 8. So look up here, number 8 here in the document, up here, this little paragraph. The standard printed exception to as to discrepancies, conflicts, shortages in an area or boundary lines, encroachments, etc. Either 1 will not be amended, so you're leaving it as is, or will be amended to read shortages in area at the expense of either the buyer or the seller. So what this is saying is that in addition to the title policy that they're getting, you can buy insurance that says if there is an encroachment or if there is something, a shortage in the area or something, that you're paying a little extra money toward that title policy to cover that. In other words, in other words, to get credit for it, you have to take that exception out. It's like to get it, you have to remove it. It's very confusing the way they've got it worded, but that's exactly what it's saying. And I have a handout that is one of the handouts I sent you that goes over that from T&T Title about that exception. So that should be helpful as well. So number 8 is the one, but make sure if there's a little box there, you've got to check the correct box that your client wants. And it's typically a small amount that's in addition to the title policy. And you could even have your buyer pay for that if they wanted to have that coverage. It's typically more needed in acreage properties where there's boundary lines that are weird and things that they may think is the boundary lines and it's not really or something. Somebody have a question?
Yeah, so I always check that second box.
Okay.
I always advise my buyers just to protect them.
I think that's wise. I think that's good. For a couple $100, they can have knowledge that if something shows up that's wrong on the boundary lines or something, it could be down the road. If you paid that extra title policy amount there, then you can go back to the title company and they have to fix it for you because you paid that money.
Okay.
So it's a smart thing to do. Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Next, we have commitment, meaning title commitment. And it says within 20 days after the title company receives a copy of this contract, seller shall furnish to buyer a commitment for title insurance. And what they're saying is that the paragraph says that the title commitment will be delivered by the seller to the buyer within 20 days. The title is going to send that, not the client, not the seller. It's himself or herself. So if something shows up and cannot be cannot be furnished within 20 days, the contract automatically extends the deadline by an additional 15 days. So you have to read these contracts to see what the fine print says. If they can't get it within the 20 days that title is trying to get it because of something that they found that showed up, then it says it's automatically, that gives them 15 more days to work on it to get that for them. The title commitment consists of schedules A, B, C, and D. And I have a handout that I sent you on that as well, explaining Schedule A. A is for the actual facts. B is for buyer notification. C is for clear to close, and D is for disclosure. So look at that handout as well, so you know what those different schedules mean in the title policy and the commitment. And just know it's not your job to explain the title policy or the title commitment. If they have a question about it, you should direct them to the title person that's handling this for you guys. This is not in our field of expertise, and it's all about title. Throw it on them and let them know that your client is going to be calling to ask a question about that. My mouth is dry. Next, we have survey. A survey is required by lenders in Texas. I mean, I can't even imagine not. It's a negotiable cost. Everything's negotiable in a contract. Just keep that in mind. But typically a buyer expense. It can range anywhere from $500, $600 to a lot more if it's acreage. Depends on the size of it and all. If a seller has an existing survey that has not been changed as to the layout, it typically will be accepted by the lender, but it isn't a sure thing. It depends on how old it is. If and all they can do is say, I don't know of anything that's been changed since I've owned it. This is really important. Existing surveys must be accompanied by a notarized residential real property affidavit known as a T47. It's a Texas Realtor 1907 document, which the seller swears it's an affirmation on there that they swear that they have not made any changes on that property. They could have made changes inside, they could have made, but as far as the location, or they have not made any additions, anything like that, they could say, well, you know, we've added a patio or something, but you never draw on the survey. You don't do that. They have to have that T47. And if they're using an existing survey to be nice to help the buyers, you know, not have to buy one, that's great. But if they don't have this T47, that buyer could say, you know, we didn't get that T47 within the time period with the survey. So I want I want the sellers to pay for a new one. And guess what? They get to pay for a new one. That must be, it doesn't say they may, it says they will provide the survey and the T47. And you don't wait until closing to get that notarized. You have them go to a bank, you have them go to a title company or someplace and have that notarized so that's legit. And if they don't want to do that, I'd say tell them you don't have a survey then. Make them get their own survey if you're not willing to go and get it notarized before. Because some people, especially during COVID times, were waiting until they got to closing to provide all this, the T47. And so guess what? They weren't really doing what that buyer could have gotten out of that because they didn't provide what they're supposed to do. I don't think the buyer could have gotten out of the contract, but they could have requested a new survey if there's enough time for it. COVID times, that was a completely different animal, and so that's just not typical. Paragraph C, existing survey exists and seller will furnish usually within 2 to 3 days, both survey and notarized T47. If either fails to be furnished, buyer may obtain a new survey at seller's expense. Paragraph C2 states buyer will obtain their own new survey at their expense, or C states that seller will furnish a new survey at seller's expense. You don't see that at all, really. A new survey can take a minimum of 15 days, but depends on the market. And we were having delays, a lot of delays between the surveying and the appraising. So you've got to keep that in mind as well. Objections. These are not your objections. These are your client's objections. If the buyer may object in writing to defects, exceptions, or encumbrances disclosed on the survey other than items 1 through 7 above disclosed in the commitment. So this means they need to write either a letter or an email. It would be better to have a letter where they've got their signatures on it and send it to their client, their agent, and then have that agent send that on as their objections to something they saw on this survey. Objections must be in writing from the buyers, signed and delivered to the listing agent and title company. 5 to 7 days is a good time frame to have the buyers review the documents that they got. And it says, provided that seller is not obligated to incur any expense, seller shall cure any timely objections of buyer or any third-party lender within 15 days after seller receives the objections. And closing date will be extended as necessary. But if you're extending a closing date, you better have an amendment officially extending that closing date so that it's right out there and it's everybody has agreed to it and they know it's going to be an extension. Okay, that's known as a cure period. And it says if the seller is unable to cure it, the problem during the cure period, buyer may cancel the contract and receive their earnest money back. There's another out for them. But they must deliver their objections in writing within 5 days after the end of the cure period, or they are considered to have waived their objections. So that's huge. Keep that in mind. Okay. So you see how you're going to look back on this many times through, hopefully, through your business, and hopefully this will help. Title notices. The buyer acknowledges that the broker advised the buyer to have an abstract of title examined by an attorney of their choice, or they should be furnished with or obtain a title policy. We have mostly title policies. We don't usually get attorneys to look things over like that. The title policy from the title company is usually handled through the title company. Some places, in some states, they use attorneys only. They don't use title companies. The attorneys. Buyers should have an attorney review the title policy if they don't understand it. They can also ask the title rep what it means. If necessary, ask to speak to their attorney for the title company for more explanation if necessary. And they'll either say, yes, okay, sure, I'll have her, you can call her here, or I'll have her call you, or no, I'm sorry, we're not able to do that. In which case, if it's required, if it's necessary, then they should get an attorney to look it over for them if they're confused about it. If using a TREC or TXR contract, which is what we should be using, this is a protection for the agent representing the buyer that the buyer was recommended to get a title policy. You should get a title policy. Most builders have their own contracts. Whoops, went too far. Have their own contracts other than the small independent builders, and though contracts are their contracts are leaning towards protection. Our contracts are leaning toward protection of the buyer. When the builder has their contracts, guess who they're protecting? Yes, the builder. They've got their attorneys who have come up with these documents that are protecting the builder, and these tract home and custom builders out there. They have their own contracts, and you need to use whatever contract they're suggesting to use. You can't say, oh no, I don't want to use your contract, I want to use the Texas Realtor. No, that's not going to happen. They're going to say, oh, okay, well, don't let the door hit you when you leave, and we'll next come on in and buy this house. For paragraph E, if it is a mandatory HOA or POA, then the seller must notify the buyer of that fact. And be sure and check the checkbox indicating it is or it is not in the HOA. And that is right up here under membership and property owners association. The property is or is not subject to mandatory membership. And so that's very important. And if you don't get notified, if the buyer doesn't get notified that there is one and they've written a contract, guess what? That's another out for the buyer. They may opt out and receive their earnest money back because they weren't notified of that fact. It's all about protecting the buyer and notifying them what they're buying. or how it's going to affect them. Then there's statutory tax districts, tidewaters, which we don't have anything here on that really, and annexation. Statutory tax districts, or is if there's an entity that has taxing authority over like a new neighborhood or something, buyer must be informed about that entity, the rates and its financial conditions, so they can know what could change on them. Keep in mind to remind your buyers of new homes that they should be aware that their taxes will go up the following year when they're taxed the next year, as the initial tax estimate when they buy a brand new home. We're talking only about new homes right now. What they're buying a new home, the taxes are based on a lot cost only. Once they've added the home onto that lot, next year they're going to, when this sells next year, their taxes are going to be based on the improved property. The tax is based on the lot and the house. Guess what costs more? The house. So that their taxes are going to go way up, and they just need to be prepared for that when they see the tax bill that comes in. Even if they're paying so much tax with their payment automatically, it's coming out, it's all in one thing, like PITI, principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. That could be a great big jump next year. It will be. So just let them know that. Tidewaters is for coastal areas, so we really don't have to worry about that here. Thank goodness. One thing, whoopee, okay. Annexation warns buyers that if a property is not currently within the boundaries of a municipality, the taxing authority, that it could change and become part at some point in the future. If it's a little area that's not in one city or the other, it could be added to, and it undoubtedly probably will be added to another city, which the taxes would be changed. And so they're just warning people, the buyers, about that as well. Okay. Property located in a certificated service area of a utility service provider. Could they not make this longer? Come on, there's room for another 8 more words in there. Just keep in mind, this first part warns the buyer that if they are purchasing in a certificated water or sewer service area, there may be a water hookup fee and additional fees to run water sewer service to the property. The second part of this is there could be a MUD or WCID involved, taxing them. There's a misconception that the MUD or WCID notices can be signed at closing. That is incorrect, because if they don't sign that MUD or water district notice prior to fully executing the contract, guess what? They've got an out in the contract up until day of closing. You've just given them, the buyers, an out on if you represent the seller, and getting out of this if they choose to. That you do not want to have that happen. The MUD or water district notices must be presented to the buyer prior to execution of the contract by the sellers or the buyer. And I put this in caps and underlined, or the buyers can walk from the contract at any time up until closing and get their earnest money back. Not option, but they will get their earnest money back. You can get those notices sometimes from some title companies, or what I always did was I just Googled the name of the water district or MUD on Google, and just went to their website, looked under documents, and get the appropriate documents that's telling what the taxes are for that. And don't believe the sellers who say they don't have a MUD or water district. They don't know a lot of the times. But we have city water. We pay our bill for the water to the city. Yes, you do. But if you go on the realist tax record, it will tell you the taxing entities. If you see MUD or WCID, that means they have a MUD and water district cost that's figured in the taxes. They're not paying it directly, but they may not even realize that they're paying it. And they are. In one case, they said, well, but Alice, they told me that they've had city water. And I said, yes, and they do. They have city drinking water for bathing and that sort of thing. But guess what? They have a MUD district issue, because that's the water that fills that community swimming pool there that's in the neighborhood. They have a water district that pays the fire hydrants that takes care of the fires that might happen in the neighborhood. So in this particular case, they had city water, and they had mud, and they had a water district. And so I said, you've got to move fast and get that document to them. But this is what I would do if that happened. So anyway, you can get them from the title company, but I also just recommend Googling that name and going to their website and getting their forms. So you have the latest and the greatest. So there, I talk about that. It could be for waste disposal, pool usage, fire services, flood prevention of parks. They could even have city water for drinking and a mud and water district for other services, just like I told you. This is what I would do if I represented the seller and what I do if I represented the buyer. If I represented the seller, I'd make sure and get this signed at the listing. So you have that at listing or soon thereafter. And if I received an offer, I'd immediately send one of those to the buyer's agent, showing when it was sent before putting an effective date on the contract, because you don't want them to have that out up until closing. If I represented the buyer, I would make sure that they were aware of that taxation, but I'd keep that in my back pocket in the folder. Of course, I'd give them a copy of it, but I would keep that in my back pocket. I'm not going to ask the other side for it, because I want to have this out if they don't give it to me within the time that we execute the contract, because you never know, something could come up. We're not looking for outs, but we want to be aware of them. So anyway, I would make sure if I represented a buyer that they know that there is a mud or water district in addition to city water. And while it's not a very large amount, it's still a requirement that they be notified before execution of the contract, okay? Public improvement districts. This is something new that just came out a couple months ago. But they're called PIDs, and it's if the property is in a public improvement district, and there's not that many that are in PIDs, but there are some. Seller must give buyer written notice as required in the property code. An addendum containing the required notice shall be attached to this contract on the property. This doesn't sound right, but anyway, that's about PIDs. And I also have an attachment in the paperwork that I sent you about PIDs, and it does list some of the PID neighborhoods. So that should be helpful to you as well. There's also transfer fees, propane gas system service areas. They're not talking about propane tanks that are behind grandma's house, or anything like that. They're talking about propane system service areas, like for a whole neighborhood. So just know that there are some areas that have that. And you can also look and see on the realist report if it has propane, if there's taxation on that. It could be that they have service and it might not show up there. You need to find out if it has propane gas from that neighborhood. So this talks about public improvement districts. And they can get out up until the end of the contract if they don't get that PID notification and it has one. If it doesn't have one, then you don't have to worry. You don't have to give the notice. But if it does have one, then you do. Talks about transfer fees, propane gas system service areas we just covered. There's a notice of water level fluctuations in the contract as well. And what it's saying is this subparagraph warns buyers that if they are purchasing in an area adjoining an area of water of at least 5,000 acre feet, they must be warned that water levels can fluctuate. Don't we know that the waters can fluctuate around here? So the Lake Travis, Lake Austin, not so much. Water levels are pretty normal because of the river, but when the dam stops the water from coming, then that of course is going to make the water levels going to go down around Lake Travis. So it's just warning them that it will fluctuate between drought or flood situation. They need to be aware of that and warned about that. You getting the idea that it's all about protecting the buyers? Yep. Next is property condition, about access for inspections and utilities. And what it's saying is utilities must remain on throughout the listing period. people want to cut the utilities off and they don't want to have to pay anymore. But if they have it on the market to sell, they must keep the utilities on. So if someone wants to go in and make an offer and then have inspections, then the utilities on for them to have a complete inspection. They says utilities must remain on throughout the listing period and until closing in order for the property to be able to be inspected during a buyer's option period and to help maintain the property. Typically, a bank-owned property or HUD property may not have utilities on. And what you'll have to do if you're selling one of those properties, you may have to get the water department or the gas or electricity company to turn it on temporarily for a day so that they can do their inspections. And then you're going to have to get it turned on if they have to go back and do re-inspections to make sure if something was supposed to be worked on. So I haven't sold too many HUD homes or bank-owned properties. It was always just a little bit more difficult to deal with. So I could always find them something that they like more than one of those. But sometimes they like that, and you just have to be aware of that. But someone, if you're going to do that and have it cut on, you're going to need, or someone's going to need to be there at the house to meet the utility provider to make sure that the faucets are on full force and the water is going to be coming out because they shut the water on. They turn the water on rather, and you need to make sure that it's not going to flood it and cause more damage, and then we've got a whole different problem. Same thing for gas. If gas is throughout the house and somebody's going to go in there, you just have to be careful about that. Then they talk about hydrostatic testing. Up here, is it up here in this paragraph? Yeah, any hydrostatic testing must be separately authorized by seller in writing. Yeah. So hydrostatic testing is a big deal because it could cause damage. And so because of that, it could cause damage. They have a separate document for that where the seller is giving you permission to have hydrostatic testing because maybe the water pressure is really low and they're wanting to find out what's going on with it. And so they may suggest a hydrostatic testing, but that could do damage to some fragile pipes and stuff like that. So there's an agreement in this form of how much the buyer or the seller would be responsible. I think it's the buyer would be responsible for paying if there was damage. So I have seen very few of these, but typically what you see this in is in neighborhoods with built in the mid-70s. Basically, it's saying before PVC pipe was invented, or they came up with that new pipes, the new pipes of for the hydrostatic use there. So when foundation damage is suspected or apparent, and the house was built from the mid-50s to the mid-70s, mid-50s to mid-70s, this is due to iron pipes primarily used before the invention of PVC pipes in the 70s. So iron and water leads to rust. Rust leads to rusty pipes, and they can fall apart and disintegrate, and basically all their water is going through a hole in the ground. That's why they have no water pressure. The pipe doesn't even exist anymore. So this means that water pipes may not even exist, and the house could be sitting on nothing but tunnels in the dirt. Hydrostatic testing is a way to test the whole house pipelines using pressure, and that's why there could be some more damage done, and they have to get permission in writing for that. I had this happen to me, and I sold a house that was cutest house. It was so retro. It was very adorable. They did a great job. Then they found out that they didn't have any pipes under the house, and they had to spend $30,000 for them to run pipes from their house underground out to where the city's pipes were. It was expensive. Luckily, they wanted to go ahead and go through with it, and it was paid off because it's been in the 50s and 70s, whenever it was built. I forget now, but they went ahead and went through with it, and they just took the money out of the closing. So that was okay for them. But just be aware of that for houses built between the 50s and 70s, that could be a possibility. Just talking about damage, and there's that addendum for authorizing hydrostatic testing. It's TXR 1949. Then the next section talks about seller's disclosure. This is a really big deal. Only the sellers may fill out a seller's disclosure. We never touch it as an agent. There are three choices here for seller's disclosures. Buyer has received the notice, buyer hasn't received the notice, or buyer is not required to get a one note furnished because doesn't meet the requirements. It's not owned by an individual or something. It doesn't matter if it's an investor from California or some other place that's bought a house here and, well, I don't know anything to fill out this seller's disclosure. Well, that's okay. We still have to have one. If they have a management company that's helping them manage it by leasing it out or something, they need to get that information from that management company, and one needs to be furnished. Even FSBOs, for sale by owners, they still need to furnish seller's disclosure. When representing a buyer, don't do the job of the listing agent and retrieve the seller's disclosure off the MLS. This is something that I tell all the agents here, and I know other compliance people say something different. However, if getting a seller's disclosure is an out for your client, why would you go in and help the other agent instead of your client by retrieving it off the MLS? It says on there that they will furnish a seller's disclosure within so many days. Why not leave that there? So they have to perform and do their job by furnishing that seller's disclosure. If you go on the MLS and retrieve it, you're doing their job for them by getting it for your client. You can look at it, but you don't say that you received it because they have not sent it to receive. They have to send it. So I would say you can look at it. You can have your client look at it before you want to make an offer, but don't put on there that you've received it because they need to send it to you, or you're taking one of the outs for your buyer away from them. You see what I'm saying? Yeah. So it has so many days to furnish a seller's disclosure. You're retrieving it from the MLS, may be taking an out away from your buyer client. Who doesn't have to furnish a seller's disclosure? There are 11 situations, and I've listed them here. Who doesn't have to furnish one? Usually we see if it's a trust or we don't see foreclosure much anymore, not yet. I don't see through divorce too much either, but a new home's not going to have a seller's disclosure. That's one of the ways. Then they're not going to have one. Just know that an unrepresented seller, sometimes known as a for sale by owner or FSBO, must still provide a seller's disclosure. An investor who's never been in the house must still provide a seller's disclosure. I already told you that if they would get their property manager, if someone is overseeing it, they need to have the information. Even if it's unknown, we still have to have one. The TREC seller's disclosure is the shortest and asks for minimum required information. The Texas Realtor disclosure is the one with more information and places to initial all pages. I don't like the TREC one just because of the fact that they don't initial all pages so that you know that they've read them. You just have them, they just sign the back page, but that's okay. Either one is acceptable. And things to remember to tell your sellers, not what you disclose that hurts you, it's what you don't disclose. They're just looking for something that you left, that you didn't do, they're looking for an out, and they're going to look on that seller's disclosure and say, oh, they didn't tell me this, and this affects me purchasing it. And it could be bogus. If the seller doesn't disclose something, just know that the neighbors may bring it up, and after the buyers move in, then there could be problems that if it had been addressed up front, it might not have been an issue to the buyers. You've notified them of something that happened there. So if they find out later, they're going, oh, they didn't tell me that. Well, maybe they didn't have to tell you that, but that's still going to make them kind of their antennas going, well, I'm not sure about this. We use here in the Northwest Market Center, and I think they do in the Southwest also, the Seller Shield dashboard that our agents are attached to whenever they come on board here. And that's where they can invite their sellers to fill out their seller's disclosure online. And it offers them, for a fee, of course, protection if there's something up in the seller's disclosure that comes up either in 1, 2, or 3 years, and depending on how many years, it ups the price of what they can pay, or they can say no, they don't want protection, and they can just fill out their seller's disclosure on there. It's not required to purchase it. It's not required for us to purchase it for them. It's just saying it's available if they want it. And so there are some agents here that offer and pay for seller's shield right off the bat, right up front. They're letting them know. I differentiate myself by offering 1 year seller's shield. It's like something like $199 or $250 or something like that for 1 year. Seller's shield, that dashboard is free for the agents to use, and their sellers to use. They don't have to purchase anything. But what the great thing about Seller Shield, filling it out there, is that if they have a question about something, it walks them through. Okay, if they don't know what a French drain is, there's usually like a little asterisk or a little button that they can push that will tell them what a French drain is. Oh, that's what it is. That takes you out of the equation answering, well, my agent told me that it was this, so I fill this in. Takes you out of the problem, so that it's less likely that somebody's going to come back on you and say, but you told me this, so I checked that. It just kind of smooths things out. It takes you out of that part completely. Also, Seller Shield offers a discounted price for bulk discounts of up to 10 to 50 protection packages. Some people buy 10 at a time and they use them for their listings. These are high producing agents, of course, that are doing this, that can afford to do that. But it's done. So make sure that Seller Shield is used. Now, there are going to be some situations, I'll just go ahead and tell you now, there are going to be situations where somebody's going to say, well, Alice, I just can't, my client is older and it's just not going to happen. So I don't know what to do, So just keep in mind that sometimes we have to make exceptions, and we may have to send them a hard copy or something if they're of a certain age and can't figure out and don't do email and all this sort of thing. That stuff happens, So you have to go with the flow. But when at all possible, use Seller Shield. It will be helpful, because what you don't want is something to come up down the road and they say, well, why didn't you tell me about Seller Shield? My neighbor told me that they got Seller Shield from their agent and nobody even told me about it. You want them to know about it. They have the option, and they can't blame you that you didn't tell them about it. That's why we want you to use Seller Shield. Acceptance of property condition. All contracts are as-is contracts. Every contract is as-is. And make sure all appropriate boxes are checked. So you'd say D1, buyer accepts the property as is. Okay. You could choose D2, buyer accepts the property as is, provided seller at seller's expense shall complete the following specific repairs and treatments. My school of thought, and you don't have to do it this way, but my thought is, why put a repair in here right now that I know I want done because it needs to be done when I'm negotiating price? Let's talk price first, and then we'll talk about repairs. So I usually check 1, it's as is, but then I also make sure that my client has an option period so that they can ask for those repairs, and then the sellers have a decision to make of either yes or no. And if they don't say yes or no, guess what? No answer is an answer. No answer is a no answer. All contracts are as is. Make sure all appropriate boxes are checked. And we're just over the things I've just kind of told you, that we're looking for big ticket items. We're not looking for missing switch plates or anything like that. We're looking for big items that need to be repaired, or it could be a big hole in the wall or something, cosmetic like that. I mean, whatever it is, make sure if your client wants it done that you put it in an amendment and gotten it signed or agreed or not agreed to within the time period. Okay. You could put something in there. Do you want to have the property professionally cleaned prior to delivery? But typically all that kind of stuff goes in the amendment with other repairs that you've asked for, repairs, or it could be improvements that you're asking for. Move on to the next page. Lender required repairs and treatments and completion of repairs and treatments. 7E, this is a buyer out if required repairs exceed 5% of the sales price. If there's so many repairs that they're going and they're required by the lender, then that's you can get out of the contract because of that. There's too many repairs needed. It's too much work. Whatever the reason for the large expense, they can get out and get their earnest money back. If any agreed upon repairs are to be completed during the process, and the seller will do so will legally and with proper permits and licensed contractors if licenses are required. We're basically talking about plumbers and electricians. I don't know about you, but I don't want to buy a house where the owner didn't take care of it during the time he was there, but all of a sudden now he wants to fix the chandelier that's in the dining room. I have a vision of fire coming out of that and not, trusting their ability unless they are an electrician by trade. Then I could agree to letting them do it. But otherwise, I want to have some hope that it's a person knows what they're doing when they're doing plumbing or electrical work. Okay, this is important if the house can't be insured without the repair. No insurance equals no lender, which equals no house. It also allows for extending the closing date by 5 days if needed to have the work arranged for by the sellers. But if you're going, like I said, if you're going to extend it because of work that needs to be done, make sure you have an amendment extending that date. Very important. Document. Then it goes on to environmental matters and residential service contracts. Environmental matters could be something about a little critter or a plant or something that's in wetlands or some kind of toxic substances, all kinds of things like that. I remember there used to be a situation over on 620 and 183 where there was a little salamander that lived there and they couldn't build on this area. Well, something happened to the salamanders or something, because all of a sudden, boom, it's all built on now. But that's environmental matters. And there's a document for that. Guess what? There's a doc for that. I'm going to talk more about residential service contracts. Some people used to call them home warranties, and they're not a warranty at all. They're just a residential service contract with a provider. Texas doesn't want us to refer to them as home warranties. They are not a warranty. They're a service plan. Residential service contracts are not required by our office, but we strongly recommend them. It's always good because you never know what's going to go wrong. And in fact, I always got a residential service contract provider to give service for coverage for my sellers as well, while they have it listed. Because if they put it if they list the property and all of a sudden the water heater goes out or something, the AC goes out, if they have that coverage, then they're going to have some help with the cost of doing that they wouldn't have if you didn't have that service policy and insure them as well as the buyers. And you can have say that will transfer to the buyer for a whole year, no matter how long the sellers had it. It's very, very minimal cost for them. Let's see. They are required to ensure coverage by our E&O provider, though. So while we can't demand that you use them, one of our E&O requirements is that we show that residential service contract was recommended to them. If a buyer doesn't want a residential service contract, have an email in your file that shows you recommended it, but they just didn't want it. And if you're asking the seller to pay for it, why wouldn't they want it? It just doesn't make sense. But the typical contract runs approximately $575. Additional coverage items such as spas and pools will make that go up. Service calls typically run $60 to $80, closer to the $80 now. Provide at least 3 names of companies to your buyer client to research and choose which one they want. It's okay to say, I have experience with this one, but I don't know what the other 2, but I've heard that they're good, and give them 3 names and let them choose, let them decide who they want. then they can't come back and say, you know, you told me to choose this residential service contract provider, and now they don't cover this. So why did you tell me that? That just avoids, let them choose, and then you're not influencing them negatively down the road. This is also very important. Order the residential service contract through the rep to make sure that the client gets the type of service contract they need with any discounts that are given and no 30-day delay of coverage. Because like, for instance, we have a relationship with American Home Shield. If you don't go through Mary Ellen Schmidt and talk to her about this, and you just sign them up on there to have one, they're going to have a 30-day wait before they can use it automatically, and that you're not getting the discount that Mary Ellen and would get for us normally. So always talk to the rep before you try to set one up for your client when they've chosen one, so that you know for a fact that they're going to have coverage as soon as they close. Okay, so that's important. Also, it's very important, don't let the title company pick what service provider you're using, because if you don't get them, if you don't get one chosen prior to closing, a substantial time before closing, you know, at least a couple weeks or a week, if you don't choose one, title will just pick one. This happened before. This has happened in the past if you didn't choose one. So let them choose. Don't let the title company choose for your client. It's important. And since we do have a small financial agreement with American Home Shield, there's a residential service contract disclosure, Texas Realtor 2513, that needs to be filled out. And if you want to see a sample of how it's filled out, basically it's for advertising and promotion. And we do receive a small amount a month from them to come and talk to you at our meetings and things like that. But just that one company. We did have another company, and we just have the one now. So you need that document as well. Brokers and sales agents, disclosure and brokers fees. It's just saying if an agent or associate broker owns more than 10% or is involved in a trust for which the broker or sales agent acts as a trustee, or if they have a spouse, parent, or child who is a beneficiary, they must notify the other party in writing before entering into a contract. So you must put in there that you have, listing agent has a familial relationship with blah, 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 something, so that they know that you have a relationship with the buyer or the seller. You need to disclose that. And if it's a cousin, I don't care if it says brother and sister. If it's a relative, I'd put it down. And it also says that all brokers' fees are spelled out in other agreements. In other words, listing agreements, or buyer's rep agreements, or agreement between brokers, or agreement between broker and owner, such as a FSBO. Those fees are not to be negotiated with the buyer or the seller. They're not party to that. That's between broker and broker in the listing agreement or the other documents like that. You know, there's a lot of people that go to these seminars and they come back thinking, oh, I'm going to wheel and deal. I'm going to get 3% knocked off of here because I know that they get 3% on one side or the other, or whatever percentage it is. So just don't let them get away with that. They have no right, unless they're an agent and they want to get their offer accepted. Number 9 is closing. Let's see how we're doing for time. We're doing okay. Closing. The closing of the sale will be on or before blank 20 blank, or within 7 days after objections made under paragraphs 6D have been cured. So it says, and that's really key, on or before. If it's after that date, you better have an amendment saying it's going to be after that date that everybody's agreed to. So I've got that note. Let's see. If in the event, I talked a little bit about here, in the event the seller can't deliver a general warranty deed, but only a special warranty deed, the buyer has an out if they choose. What that says is that the trustee for the property on behalf of the lender to the new owner is saying they can't guarantee a clear title for the entire life of the property ever since it was built, only since they owned it. And that's typical, that's normal. So one is not better than the other. It's just they're saying they do not have any knowledge past the point of when they owned it. And that's usually sufficient. But if the seller agent wanted to close the loophole, I've got information there on how they would do that. And closing is amended with a statutory change to the property code, noting that the buyer has to acknowledge to a tenant that the buyer has acquired the property and is responsible for the return of security deposit. So you see why it would be important to make sure that you're getting the security deposits from the previous owner who had a landlord or something that was handling that. You'd want to get that. A notice to tenant of change of management and accountability for security deposit could be used for that after you've closed. So they know where to send their check. They're not sending it to the old person, the old owner. Next, 10 is possession. It's two choices: upon closing and funding, or according to a temporary residential lease. Specifies whether the buyer will receive the property from the sale after funding of the loan, or will there be a buyer's or seller's lease back involved. Lease back can be asked for, but is not a given. It's a negotiable item that you can ask for. Typically, how you determine that is you take the PITI, principal, interest, taxes, and insurance payment, and divide it by the number of days in the month to calculate a fair daily rental amount that they would be putting in the lease back. And important to remember, a lease back cannot be for longer than 90 days. 90, can't be longer than that. It's not a lease back then, it's a lease. Seller's temporary residential lease, it goes into a little description of that, or a buyer's temporary residential lease when they want to occupy the property before closing, which is not a good idea. The seller's temporary residential lease is when the seller needs to stay in there for a time period past closing. That's never really good either, because until they get all their stuff out of the house, you don't know if the floors are damaged or underneath their rugs, or you get to see the real thing when all their stuff's out. So those are two situations. And sometimes you have to have a lease back just because they've got furniture coming and they weren't expecting it to be this soon or whatever, to find something, whatever it is. Just know that it's possible, but it's not great. If you can get by without a lease back, do it. Buyers or sellers should contact the insurance rep to see how a temporary lease will affect their possessions being covered by insurance. So if the sellers are staying in the house after it's closed, they no longer have protection for their goods in the house. They are a tenant then. So they need to get renter's insurance for their items in the property because they're a tenant. The buyer of the property, they have protection of the building. They have insurance for that, but that it won't cover any of that seller's goods inside the house. So that's a smart thing to look into. Thinking of smart devices section was added to clarify that those devices get transferred with the sale of the property. If there's a smart device and you say, Alexa do this, Alexa do that, make sure that you have your clients change their passwords. You do not want somebody that has taken the smart device with them or something, or left it there. They still have access to knowing what Alexa's doing. We've had a situation where somebody moved out of the house and said, well, we really like what you've done with the backyard. Well, how do you know? Because they had not changed their password and they still had access to look into their backyard or where it was that they had access to. Craziness like this. It's a new world. So that's just talking about password. Have them change it to password or something generic that they don't want to use personally. At this time, Trek doesn't don't see it as substantial enough usage of smart devices to change their seller's disclosures. But I suspect that that's going to come at the next changes. They will probably add that in. They just haven't changed it yet. Next. Special provisions. Okay, be careful about putting anything in this paragraph that could be perceived as you practicing law. We are not attorneys and can't put something in there that says, if this happens, then that will happen. This is considered practicing law. If they do this, then this will happen. Facts only. Sometimes we try to help too much, and this usually gets us in trouble. Anything that's covered in a TREC promulgated form should not go in this paragraph. So you would not say that you want to have the existing washer, dryer, and refrigerator in that paragraph like we used to do in the old days, because now there's that non-realty item addendum. So that's just saying if there's an addendum or a document that covers it, use that document. You could put in there, though, additional buyers and sellers if their names didn't fit on the first page. You could add a longer legal description that didn't fit in the paragraph 2. You could offer an offer deadline, which hardly anybody's doing anymore because that's just please, sir, sell me your home. Never put lease purchase information in this paragraph or any other place because there are no promulgated forms for lease purchases. So only an attorney could help them with a lease purchase. And you just don't see that much anymore. Never use an escalation clause in this paragraph. Escalation clauses are not to be used unless they're created by an attorney for that client. That's where you are offering a dollar amount over the highest dollar amount offered. So you're saying, I'll pay $5,000 over the best offer that you get. And so just make your highest and best offer and move on if you don't get it. Put down what you're willing to pay for it if you want it, not play those games. So that's one thing that I had to deal with this week. Is about somebody who wanted to use escalation clause because they were an attorney. So I said, well, they can put anything they want to. We can't put anything we want to because we're not attorneys. Neither do I want to be one.
So in the case that you had that happen,
Yeah.
Your client, let's say your attorney client, what would they use to put that in? Like they would have their own contract or their own paper, or add it in there?
No, you would have them type something up that says that's an escalation paragraph to be added to the contract. That's
Okay.
something that they could do, and you could put C attachment A or something, refer to that, but you cannot do it yourself for them.
And would you have them attach their credentials as well?
Yeah, I wouldn't go that far. As long as you know they're an attorney and
Okay.
they've got it. As long as you're not doing it, that's what
Right.
matters to me and to KW.
Got it.
Let the other side, if they want to ask them how they ranked in their class or whatever. Settlement and other expenses. This is a paragraph you look at right after you look at paragraph 3C to see how much they offered, because you're seeing if they're asking for any closing costs to be paid. So they're going to automatically say, okay, they're offering this and they're asking for this much closing costs, take that away. So they see what their offer is actually. Maximum contribution for a conventional loan is between 3 to 6% if owner occupied. Always confirm with the lender what these amounts are, because they can change, and I'm not out selling right now. So always confirm with the lender what the maximum contribution is. Contribution for VA, FHA, or USDA. It's recommended to always check with the lender for those maximums. The property must appraise to cover the full amount, including the part paid by seller. So it should appraise at the sales price. And then, of course, we're talking about that appraisal addendum in an addenda class that I don't think has scheduled yet for next year. But let's move on to the next so we don't run out of time. Prorations. This is something that title is going to figure out for you. The prorations of like HOA fees or taxes or any of the prorations that they come up with. They're going to take care of that. They also will send out a form stating who will be paying the taxes of closing, and it's very important to timely respond to that as to whether someone with a senior citizen exemption will be paying the taxes ordinarily due or the buyer will. That's where you get in. it gets interesting is when it's okay to prorate, but when the one side has a senior citizen exemption or another type of exemption on their taxes, they don't pay as many taxes as the person maybe who's buying it, who is 30 years old or whatever, not a senior citizen. So they have to work that out, and title will bring that up. It's up to the seller and buyer to work out any discrepancy in taxes between them. And in fact, title will have the buyers and sellers sign something at closing to that effect, that they will work it out themselves and not get title or us involved, because we have nothing to do with that. Thank God. Casualty loss is just talking about if the property is damaged or destroyed by fire or other casualty between the effective date and closing. The seller has a chance to restore the property to its previous condition. Unless it's burned to the ground, you're not going to be able to probably do that in time for the closing, or the buyer can terminate and get earnest money refunded. The buyer can choose to give the seller more time to make repairs, or it can even accept the property and the insurance proceeds and deductible to complete the repairs him or herself, provided their lender's okay with that. Lender is the one that has the money. The lender is the one that decides. Okay. Default. This is an important paragraph, paragraph 15. This explains what default is and how it's determined and how it's remedied. It basically says if the seller refuses to sell or the buyer refuses to buy, the other party can sue them for specific performance. If buyer is refusing to continue due to one of the many outs a buyer has, then that is not a default. The seller has almost no outs of the contract. All they can do is say no to something. No, I'm not going to do any repairs. No, I'm not going to do this. And then the buyer can decide if they want to get out or not. So anything regarding repairs or extensions of time to give them more time for something, all they can do is say no, basically. If the sellers find that earnest money is not deposited or option for that matter per the contract, then the buyer will be in default. Only thing is, if they're in default, you can terminate, but you got to put it back on the market right away, because you've got no option fee and you've got no earnest money. And then what are you going to do? Go sue them? Probably not. You're probably going to say, well, dang. That's why you want to ensure that your clients and the other side are depositing earnest and option timely.
Absolutely.
And so you're also going to have to request that last page to be filled out by the title company that shows when earnest and option was received and everything. So you have that to make your contract complete when you have all that. Because I'm going to look, I and the compliance people that report to me are going to be looking at that to make sure that we have those the receipted page. Okay. Mediation and then attorney's fees. I've been to a couple of mediations and it's really interesting. You know, the one side goes into one room, one side has the other side, and they're usually their broker or compliance person, and sometimes they'll bring an attorney with them. And then the mediator just goes from one room to the other. They've offered this, they go back to the other one. Well, no, we won't take it. We need this. They'll go back to the other side, and they just mediate that separately, not with each other, so nobody starts a fist fight or anything. They keep them separated and they just try to negotiate and work it out. It went really well with the one I was at, and basically I just said, we're insulted by their offer. Tell them we need this, and and they had an attorney with them and we didn't, but we actually got what we asked for. And the person on the other side showed up with their arm in a sling and looked really pitiful. She looks so sad and everything. And once we worked this out, the next day she showed up without that. She was healed overnight. It was amazing. So anyway, attorney's fees, it's just saying mediation is only used if the parties can't work it out themselves. And usually you don't really want to fool with mediation if you don't have to. It's not expensive, but it's also not enforceable. Once they have something in writing, once they agree to something, the mediator then writes it up in a document and gives them both a copy that says what they've agreed to do. But if they don't do it, there's no teeth in it to enforce them to do it. At that point, then you'd have to sue them and go that route. After you tried mediation, that didn't work. Luckily, they agreed to what we asked for. you got our client taken care of. Okay, so that's that. Escrow, expenses, demand, damages, and notices. Escrow is a title company, is a neutral third party that will hold the earnest money. You want them to be neutral. Sometimes it feels like they're not neutral, but you want them to be neutral. If they want your business, again, they better be. They hold the earnest money and option money until both parties give them instructions on whether to apply it or divide it in case the transaction terminates. If they have a right to terminate it, then they're entitled to get the earnest money back. They should, and the title should honor that. Sometimes you have people that get their feelings hurt though, and they say, no, I'm not going to sign that form. Well, it just says on expenses, it explains how the earnest money is applied to any expenses such as HOA information requested or septic inspections or surveys or anything like that, that money has had to go out. But I think now they've kind of narrowed it down where everybody has to pay for that as they go instead of leaving that to the title. Demand states that each side may submit their request for the earnest money. They don't have to be on the same form. Paragraph D says that if your client fails to release the earnest money within 7 days of the receipt of the release of earnest money, they could be liable for earnest money plus attorney's fees and all costs of a lawsuit. You don't want it to get to that point, but it's saying in here in the words somewhere, I have to find it exactly, but they've got 7 days. Let's see. Yeah, 7 days of receipt of the request will be liable if they don't sign it when they know the other side's entitled to it. They're just stalling. There's TXR does have a form, notice of termination of contract, and allows for specific reasons for termination. And as long as it's one of the legitimate reasons for termination, then that should be released. Once your clients have signed it, you send it to the other agent and to title to let them know your request. You keep title in the loop so they know that, oh, you know, it's not, the other side hasn't signed it, but we know that they're asking for it now. Let's see, if the title company doesn't hear from the other side within 15 days, they are authorized to release it. Typically, they don't want to do that because they don't want to tick somebody off that is a client, even though they're on the other side. Doesn't matter which side they're on. They typically won't release it until both sides agree to it. They don't want to get involved in their mess. So that's how that works. Damages explains that if a party is owed the earnest money that through default of the other party and the losing side doesn't sign the release within 7 days, they can take them to court for damages, just like we talked about. Notices says that all notices can be sent via email, fax, and mail, or hand delivered to the information shown in paragraph 21. If the information isn't filled in for each side, the title company cannot notify the clients of requests or changes. So when we get to paragraph 21, you got to make sure you've got information in there so that the title company knows where they can send notices and things such as that. We used to leave it blank because we didn't want the other side to have contact information for our clients. And now, you know, we got to the point where it said, okay, I just dare you, I double dog dare you to go ahead and contact my client. Just go ahead, do it, make my day, go ahead. I'll file an ethics complaint against you or whatever. So just know you got to put their information in there. It's really specifically for title to be able to send notices. Representations, if the seller has misrepresented anything in the contract, such as liens, etc., they will be considered in default. That's when you get to that situation where you're going, oh, they didn't tell us that they had an IRS lien for $100,000 or whatever it is, you know, what small amount, it doesn't matter. There's a lien on it. Seller may continue to show the property and release and receive back up offers unless specified in writing that they cannot. It also says that. Federal tax requirements talks about foreign person meaning someone who is not part of the U.S. government tax system is what that all is all about. What happens if that in that case? The title company will hold from sales proceeds the amount to comply with the tax laws and delivers the same to the IRS. So the client that may not be from this country needs to be aware that that's what's going to happen, because they don't understand sometimes. They're like, nobody told us that. Well, they should have been more careful when they bought it, but they got to know that that's Uncle Sam's going to get their money. And the last sentence is just in regards to Homeland Security requirements. So that's about all that is. They don't want money and they don't want cash, no suitcases of money. And here's where paragraph 21 is about notices. All notices from one party to the other must be in writing and are effective when mailed to, hand delivered at, or transmitted by fax or electronic transmission as follows. If you represented the buyer, you'd put their information in there. If you represented the buyer, I would still put on the seller side, at least the agent email address over there on that side, because you don't want them, you want them to get notified of certain things. But you just put your side in and just put the agent on the other side's email address in there. There's nothing wrong with doing that. It's used by the title company, so it's very important that it's filled in, or as the title attorney has told me, without that filled in, we can't notify them of something that's really important. So that's important. Let's see what else. Okay, let's move on from that. Agreement of the parties. Here's where other documents that are attached to this contract or this offer, you have to check the box. If there's third-party financing addendum, to make it part of this offer, you've got to check the box and attach that third-party financing addendum if there's financing involved. Seller financing addendum, you don't see that very often. There's not much seller financing anymore, but there is occasionally some pop up. If there's an HOA, or if there's a buyer's temporary residential lease, let's see, you see that a lot. There's the addendums for sale of other property by buyer. You know, if they've got a house, they've got to sell before they can buy this house. There needs to be an addendum that explains that and how long they're willing to, how long that they're willing to wait for them to sell that house. You know, it's never, you lose a lot of strength if you've got to sell a house before you can buy their house. They want somebody that can come in and pay for it and move on. Hydrostatic testing, there's the box to check for that. Just about everything that you normally see is on here, except, let's see, I don't think they've added it. You check other and put residential service contract disclosure, TXR 2513, if that applied. If there's a residential service contract, almost said home warranty, involved in that. Anything that's not involved, that's discussed but wasn't on this list, that's where you'd add it there in that last section. The only thing you wouldn't add on this is seller's disclosure. Seller's disclosure is not part of this offer. That's simply a notice from one side to the other side. So that's the only thing that you would still get signed, but you don't attach to this. Or you do attach it, you can attach it to it, but you don't have to, you don't list it here because it's not really part of it. So that's important to have those check boxes on there. Okay. Let's move on. We're getting close to the end of it. Consult an attorney before signing. It's just saying if they want to consult an attorney, they can. One is not required. Typically, I don't see anything in there. And you do not have to put NA in every empty box. Every line that has a blank or anything, you do not have to put N/A in it. Just leave it blank. You're going to have a copy. You're going to keep your copy. You're going to know what you agreed to, what you didn't. Just don't go there. That's just ridiculous, overkill. So that's that. You can read that when you are bored. They put the blank day of blank in a box, really dark, because it's really important. This is the date that the clock starts ticking. So when they have whichever agent has it last, when everything's initialed and signed and it's all done, whoever has it last with the last initials fills in that date and then sends that and notifies the other side that they have executed the contract, and it is now not an offer, it is now a contract. It's very important to do. Do not send it to title without something filled in that blank. And it should be something that you both sides agree on that is the right thing to put in there. And I will tell you this also. If you represent the seller, you want to sign last. And you say, well, Alice, of course I would sign last. They're buyers, they're going to send it to me. No, that's not what I mean. You can initial anything that they've a change that they have written in there, you can initial it as a seller, but don't sign it until everything is agreed to, everything, all initials, any changes are made. And then at the very last, when it suits your seller, then fill it in. And why is that, you say, Alice? It's because between now and then, a really great cash offer could come in that's not requiring them to sell a home first, or something that's 50 or 150,000 over list price, and they really want this house. Do the sellers want that? Absolutely, they want that. Do not let them sign it until everything is agreed to and it's all initialed and signed by the buyers. And then at that point, if anything needs to be initialed additionally, then you would do that. And then at that point, the sellers have the decision, okay, we'll sign it now. Once they sign it though, it's done. And if that offer comes in, you know, we'll let them be in the backup position, and we'll just say no to everything they ask for. And of course, what happens is the first offer, the first contract, they don't ask for anything because they know that that's what's going to happen. So just know that the last person, the last agent fills that date in, not the client, the last agent. So be sure the effective date is filled in. And once the effective date is filled in, you never touch this document again. Once it's filled in, that means everybody signed it, both sides, and initialed. You don't touch it. It's only amended or an addendum is added to it. That's all. Okay, let's see. Next, we have broker information. This is important too. As you may or may not know, July 1st this year, we got a new license number. And I need to change this and add that license number so that you have that. But depending on which side you're on, if you're the listing agent or brokerage, you're going to be on the right-hand side. If you represent the buyer, you're going to be on the left-hand side. But if it's an intermediary situation, then you're both going to be on the right-hand side. The listing broker up here and the down here, the selling associate's name and listing broker, that's all listing broker. And then it starts down here where you're going to put the selling associate's name because you're both under that same brokerage. What intermediary means is the broker is the broker of both sides. Like Jean Grubb is our broker. She would be, if she's the broker of the selling agent and the buying agent, then that's an intermediary situation. And you're all both going to be on the right-hand side. And there's only 3 offices that we're, well, and more than 3 offices when you see the satellite offices, but basically Lake Travis, Austin Southwest, and Austin Northwest are intermediary. Southwest has some satellite offices, and I put those down here. Where did I put that? Over here. Okay. Be sure to select the correct checkbox depending on which side you're working. If both agents work for any of these KW locations, they require an intermediary notice to be signed. Texas Realtor 1409, if any of these locations, Northwest, Southwest, Bastrop, Dripping, Buda, Austin, Lake Travis, Austin Portfolio, I meant to say. So any of those, it's intermediary. If it's Round Rock, no. If it's Cedar Park, no. They have different brokers. It's all broker driven. Below that information is the blank to fill in the buyer broker commission percentage. This will not change the commission offered in the MLS. So put in what's in the MLS or what you've agreed to. If there's a different commission that has been agreed to than what's in the MLS, you need to use a document called Registration Agreement Between Brokers, TXR 2402, or if you're working with a FSBO for sale by owner, there's nothing in the MLS, right? So you need to have a different agreement between broker and owner that Texas Realtor 2403 used. You have to have something that's going to guarantee you a commission. You're not doing this for fun, all the liability and all the hard work. So if it's not been put in the MLS yet, you would need one or the other of those documents. More than likely, you would need the between broker and broker. because they may have a pocket listing that you want to make an offer on or something. You've got to have something in writing saying they agreed to pay you a commission, or we can't help you obtain a commission if it's not in the MLS. If it's in the MLS, we're in pretty good shape. But if it's not, we don't have a leg to stand on. Remember, our name on contracts is supposed to be Keller Williams Realty, not that new name, the parent name that we've got, KWATX Broker LLC. That is not what we want on here. We want the Keller Williams Realty, which is a DBA of that name used. And our license number, which is, I've got it here for you, 9010968. That's our new license number. Be sure and do not use the old number or your number in the line for the listing broker or other broker. Just make sure that you're using the right number. Your supervisor is me, and my license number is 336633 for your reference, so you can fill that in on that intermediary or whichever side you're on. Oh, yes, I've been in business a long time with that low number, but that's okay. I still got most of my teeth. Okay. Option fee receipt. It's very important to have receipted within the 3 days to deliver option. If option check is not delivered before the 3rd day after the effective date, the buyer has no option. Please read paragraph 5 for clarification. This was changed to have only escrow agent signing for the option fee. And it does say escrow agent. Nobody else is going to be signing. If an additional option fee is needed because they need to extend or something of that nature, then the check would be made payable to the seller, and you would give that to the listing agent. You don't go through title for that. If there's additional option involved, that goes straight to the agent to give the seller immediately. So I know this is a lot to remember, guys, and I know that you feel like you're taking a sip of water out of a fire hose. I get it. I truly do. But I just want you to have everything down here that can help you feel confident about this. Now, they have the place for the earnest money receipt, and you can read this as easily as I can. It's pretty simple. Just read that. And also contract receipt. Sometimes you want to deliver the contract to title, but you don't have the checks, and you just want to make them aware of it's coming, so they can receipt just the contract if you wanted to do that. Also, if there was additional earnest money receipted, that needs to be receipted on here. And why you would need additional? Why do you think you'd need additional earnest money? I think I already said it, but the reason you might need additional earnest money is because you were in a backup position and you now are in primary position, and you stated in that offer that you would bring additional earnest money if you moved into primary position. That's when you would need it. And that's it, guys. And now you know more than 90% of the agents out there. You are so lucky to have somebody to go to ask a question besides just the broker, because we know the broker is busy, right? Gene Grubb now has something like close to 1,900 agents. And so it's really important to have a great compliance person that you can reach at any time. I give my cell phone number out. I take calls on the weekend. I take calls on holidays. I don't have a life anymore. But just know that I would rather hear from you, and you to know that you can reach me if you had an emergency kind of situation that you need to know something real quick. Then if you were a coach, you'd contact your coach. But if you don't have a coach, then you can contact me, and you can jot down my phone number. It's 512. What is my number? 638-7400 is my cell. My office number is 512-637-8311. So during business hours, I like to take it here. But after hours, if you have a question that can't wait until business hours, then absolutely feel like you can call me. And that's it. Any questions that I can help you with?
Yes, please. Can I ask you, teacher?
Of course.
Can I ask you?
Of course.
Okay. When I submit offer,
Yeah.
if they don't accept it, what I lose?
What do you lose?
Yes.
Your time.
No, no money I lose because I have to pay for earnest money.
If you're making an offer,
Yes.
you're not giving them money until after you have a contract.
Okay, then I lose nothing.
You lose nothing. You're
Okay.
you just lose your time.
I know.
When
Thank you.
we were doing all the multiple, 100 offers for one house or something,
Yeah.
that was horrible for
Yeah.
us, not for the seller, but it was horrible for us because we were writing up contract after contract, offer. And it's just the time factor. But what you have to make your clients know is within 3 days, they've got to get this money if they get accepted to title by 5 o'clock, or they've lost out.
The earnest money and the option fee. Yes.
I'm sorry?
The option fee and the earnest money.
Correct.
Okay.
That's right. That's right. Anything else, guys?
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yep. Okay, well, you know how to reach me if you have a question. You can email me at Alice, ALICE, Caron, CARON @kw.com. Okay,
Thank you so much, Alice.
you're welcome. I hope you have a great holiday coming up, and I think I'm going to go to a Christmas luncheon now.
Yay.
So,
Thank you.
y'all have a great day and week. Okay,
Take care.
Thank
Bye.
you. Thank you so much.
you're welcome. Bye-bye, guys.
Bye.
Okay, see you later. Bye.
Okay. Alice, can you
Yes.
you say you record this class where I
Yes.
can find it if I want to read another time?
It will be on our website, austinNW.com, our website.
Yes.
There's all kinds of videos on there. There should be one already from my last class already on there. Ruth will.
Under your
will put-
name?
I'm sorry.
Under your name? Under your name?
It'll be under compliance.
Compliance. Okay.
Uh-huh.
Thank you so much, Alice. Have a
You're
nice
welcome.
day.
Thank you. You too. Bye-bye.